Hello and welcome to this NCFE Professional Development Week session, Once Upon a Time Teaching, using storytelling as a teaching tool. My name is Charmaine Phelps and I work on the provider development team here at NCFE, supporting our providers with the planning, delivery and preparation for assessments of their assessments. But once upon a time, I worked as a professional storyteller. So this session will explore the power of storytelling as a dynamic and impactful pedagogical tool across subjects and age groups. So this session is perfect for teachers of all phases and subjects who want to enhance engagement, deepen understanding and build meaningful connections through narrative. We'll explore what storytelling is, the benefit of sharing personal stories within your teaching, stories for remembering. We'll look at some storytelling techniques and then stories for comprehension. So what is storytelling? Storytelling is how we learn as children, how we understand our past. It's how we learn to read, write and speak, how we share experiences and influence others. Our thinking is influenced by stories, be that the news or informal conversations or what we overhear. Our behaviour can be influenced by stories. But what do you think of when we use the word storytelling? What springs to mind for you? You can pause the recording and make a note for yourself, but I'll share what our attendees in the live session had to say. So for some, they said, well, it's, narrating fables or fairy stories, narrating experiences. It might be about sharing personal first-hand experiences or sharing what's happened in the past or bringing something to life and allowing imagination to go to new places. Creativity, imagination, making meaning. Or one attendee said the ability to touch other people's imaginations using as tools words or sounds, gestures, drawings, and any creative resources to transmit the content. So yeah, there's lots of different ways you can tell a story. It doesn't always have to be verbal, actually, storytelling. So we're going to start off by looking at connection. As mentioned at the start, once upon a time, before I worked for NCFE and my children were small, I was working as an Ofsted registered childminder when somebody from one of the organisers from one of the local Sure Start centres asked me if I'd do some storytelling. They knew that I'd been a teacher, they knew that I'd worked as an actress, so they thought I might be able to tell some stories. So I showed up as myself with a nice dress on and a bit of a scarf to make me look, I don't know, a little bit unusual, and told stories, and the children really, really enjoyed it. And because they enjoyed it, word got round and I did a few more sessions at other local places. But some of the feedback that I got was that the adults, the people in charge, were expecting something a bit more, not in terms of the stories, but in terms of the way I presented myself. So me being me was just a bit too ordinary. And so I realised that I needed to come up with something that was appealing not just to the children, who were, to be honest, just very, very engaged with the stories, but that appealed to the grown-ups or the parents who were the ones paying for my service ultimately. So I came up with this character, Daisy Wellington, and got my friend to create a costume for me. So there's me as a Daisy Wellington. Why am I telling you this? I am not telling you this because I think that in order for you to use stories in your teaching, you need to dress up in a very silly costume. I'm telling you this because it's a true story about myself. Telling personal stories allows your audience or your class to engage with you and know a little bit about you. Being open and honest builds trust. So in this situation, I'm hoping that the fact that I have told lots and lots of stories and worked as a storyteller and sort of gauged my audience, if you like, I'm hoping that that might make you trust that I know a little bit about what I'm talking about here. Empathy. Other benefits of sharing personal stories are empathy. If I told you about something that's happened that I've struggled with, it allows you to have empathy with the situation that I'm presenting. Hope. If I tell my learners about something I've gone through that they may potentially go through and I got through to the other side, then it shows that hope of getting out to the other side is possible. Or stories don't always have to be about yourself. It might be another learner who was in exactly the same situation, but they tried different methods, etc., and eventually they got through to the other side. Humour. Quite often, stories can be funny, which helps learners relate to you. And telling a personal story, it doesn't have to be a very big, long-winded story. Even just the journey that you had to work this morning, for example, lets learners see a more human side to you, which can help with connection. And stories can be a great way if you want to affect change, such as a change in behaviour. Stories can connect with your learners so that they decide to make a change rather than you simply asking or instructing them to behave differently. Storytelling is a great tool in your armoury as a teacher. So, as a little practice, we're going to tell a story on the next slide. Now, perhaps we became teachers because we are just so clever and we have never struggled with learning anything ever. But let's face it, that's highly unlikely to be the case, which is actually a really good thing. But if we try to present an image of ourselves as the perfect know-all experts, if we present that to our to our learners, or even if we don't intentionally present that, but that's the way our learners see us, how's that going to make them feel? You can have a think for yourself. Ultimately, in our live session, the attendees suggested things like that it's not possible, achievement isn't possible for them, or words to that effect. So we're going to spend the next 5 minutes thinking about our own stories of struggle, possibly or hopefully with a sort of a learning connection, something perhaps we've struggled to learn. Now, at heart, I am a maths teacher, as some of you may know from my functional skills maths sessions, and this bar model gives us a very basic story model. The setup or situation at the start, where you were, what was going on, who was around, and then the bulk of the story in the centre is the trials and tribulations that our story's hero goes through, and then finally some kind of a solution or resolution at the end. Now, a story I'd like you to think about, and by all means you can pause the recording to do this, and I would like it to be a true story, please, is a time that you have struggled in a learning context and then overcome that struggle at the end. It might relate to a subject you teach, or it could be from real life. For example, a struggle with learning to drive. I was the first one in my family to fail their driving test, which is something that lives with me always. Or if you're struggling to think of an example from your life, you can always tell us about a learner that struggled to learn something and how they overcame this struggle. So in the live session, we did use annotate for attendees to write on the screen. But for you watching this recording, please have a little think and pause the recording and come back to it once you've made note of a story where you've struggled in a learning context, or a good example of a learner struggling and how they overcame this. And these are the examples that we came up with in the live session using Annotate. So we've got somebody who wasn't particularly very good at English, grammar still not as good. However, they did do their GCSEs at the age of 32 and learnt an awful lot. So there's a nice overcoming story. Any language I never could learn from rote. Living in another country, talking to people, I managed to learn enough to get by. So yeah, quite often with learning another language, you kind of need to immerse yourself. I struggled to learn theories of development at university, but used mind maps and post-it notes. Okay, so that's, again, that is a nice story of something that you struggle with and, a way of finding a solution to that. I hated swimming the whole trip to the pool and didn't learn for ages. It's lovely, nice, simple thing everybody can relate to. Not everybody hates swimming. I love swimming, but the fact that you hate it and it's something that you're kind of forced to do, sort of overcoming that's a nice one. Somebody struggled with GCSE maths, parents helped with extra tuition, made the world of difference and realised I could actually do it. This could be the same person. I couldn't comprehend algebra. I struggled with IT, Java in school, and opened up to my teacher about this, and they ended up showing me extra tips after class, and I ended up getting a gold certificate in the upcoming IT competition. Oh, that's lovely. So we've got, clear, the setup of the story. We know where they were and what happened, the struggles that they had. The hero of this story, this unknown user, asked for help. And because they asked for help, they got that extra help. And then, the solution or resolution was not just that they learnt it, but they actually got a certificate. That's a lovely story. And then some of our attendees also added in some of their ideas into the session chat. So we've got the attendee responses from the session chat. So somebody said they've always struggled with learning throughout their life. For example, I needed to read a text about the history of art at least 5 times to understand and learn it. When I was studying and training to play guitar, I practiced for at least 5 to 6 hours a day to be able to play well. The same effort was required when I was learning how to draw at the age of 14. This tells me a lot about this person, because I have to say that they are extremely resilient and determined. The fact that they put in 5 to 6 hours a day to play the guitar, I think that's to be commended. With this one, with maths teaching, students may ask if we've always been good at maths, whereas we all learn maths by making mistakes, just like learning to ride a bike. I like that idea, actually. Yeah. Have you always been good at maths? Well, not always necessarily. First thing I used to tell my students is, I am a teacher under construction in the same way they are students under construction. We are both building our future together. I love that idea, actually, and thank you very much for sharing it, one of our attendees at the live session. So that was storytelling for connection. Now we're going to look at storytelling for remembering, and we're going to do a little exercise now to see how good we are at remembering things. Now, you've likely played this game before. I don't know why it's called Kim's Game or who Kim is, but never mind. I'm going to set, in the live session, I was going to set a timer for 30 seconds to see if you can remember as much as possible of what you can see on the slide you're not allowed to write anything down. And I will do this for the sake of the recording. I'm going to set a quick 30-second timer, and then that will be my signal to move on to the next slide. So I'm going to set a timer now. No writing anything down, just try to remember all of the objects. In the live session, I gave the attendees 2 minutes to write down as many objects as they could possibly remember. So feel free to do this for yourself. If you've not cheated and you've done your 30 seconds of trying to remember them, try and now you can pause the recording. I'm not gonna just be silent for 2 minutes. You pause the recording and write down as many as you can remember, and try not to cheat, try not to rewind and look back at the past bit of the recording. And in the live session, so I'm going to show you them all now, and you can give yourself the score. So this is the time to pause if you don't want to see them. So here we go. In the live session, everybody put their answers in the chat, and we looked at who'd scored the most highly, and we thought about what tactics they used in order to score so highly, and we got a range of responses actually. Some of the attendees who did quite high, I think the highest we got was 14 in the live session, so well done if you beat that while watching along on the recording. And we had one of our attendees said trying to make a story using the images, which is what I was sort of expecting somebody to say they used a story, but also things I didn't expect was somebody sort of putting them in alphabetical order. How they did that without writing anything down, I don't know, but that's what they said. Rhyming, thinking about rhyming. Somebody linked similar objects, so they kind of like put them into groups and then thought about it. So that's kind of like a revision technique, isn't it? Sort of grouping things together. Somebody else, interestingly, which is brilliant. Oh, somebody else like linked similar objects, and somebody else did a grouping, sort of grouping similar objects and remember how many are in that category, like ant, cat, and bee, because they're all creatures. And this person is very visual, so they remember the object shape rather than the names, and also remember the placements. So that's interesting. But somebody else said that they've got a certificate as a CCTV operator, so we would expect them to be very good at remembering. That's quite unusual. So those were the responses from the attendees in the live session. So with the story technique, you place all of the objects sort of within a story, and then all you need to do is remember that story, and that way you'll come up with all of the objects. So here's an example of a story that you can tell about those objects. My alarm woke me up on my birthday on a rainy day. I stopped my cat from getting stung by a bee. I popped my cap on. I packed an apple and a banana in my rucksack. After swatting an ant off of it, then I set off for the cinema. There's my 3D glasses for the cinema, to watch Titanic in 3D. That was my intention. But instead of showing Titanic, it was showing Wicked or Wicked. Halfway through the film, the fire alarm went off and a truck came to put it out. So in telling myself or creating that little story, it makes it far easier for me to remember all of the objects. So storytelling as a memory aid, you can think about how that might apply to the subject that you teach. And now we'll look at storytelling for comprehension. Storytelling can help with understanding. You can create the context that makes sense of a particular concept. You can simplify complexity. You can encourage reasoning and engage learners kinesthetically, even when you're simply speaking. I happen to be, I'm useless actually at listening, shouldn't admit that, but I'm not an auditory learner. But if somebody tells me a story, I can kind of picture myself in it, feel the things that they're feeling, etc. And that engages me kinesthetically, even though I am still just hearing words. I will ask on the next slide for some examples of concepts within your subject area that could be brought to life or made easier to understand by using a storytelling approach. But first, I'll go over some storytelling techniques that are also true for any kind of public speaking that you may do. And these techniques have been taken from this particular blog, which, although it's about pitching your business, it's storytelling techniques, but I found this that was in an easily shareable format for you. So the first technique is questions. Questions can be used when setting up a story to build empathy and curiosity. So for example, you might ask learners, have you ever wondered how? And then give them something strange or unusual, how that came to be. Or I can give you an example of a question to all of you now, or to you at home now, or I did this in the live session. Give me a thumbs up reaction, okay, to this question. Have you ever taught a lesson that you had planned meticulously and were really proud of? And you thought, wow, this is going to go brilliantly. But then when it came to doing the lesson, you very quickly had to change everything completely because your learners were just not understanding. Has that ever happened to you? So that's a technique. Obviously, gets you to put yourself in that situation. And because I've deliberately chosen something that I think most teachers will have experienced, it allows a level of engagement and you're putting yourself in the picture. Setting the scene to really engage your audience. You want them to live the story as you tell it, and you can help this along with your use of language. So instead of saying something like I was afraid to be the first person in my family to fail their driving test, you could replace it with, can you imagine how I felt to be the first person in my family? And bear in mind, I've got 6 older brothers and sisters, so I was 7, lucky number 7. Can you imagine how it felt to be the first one to fail? That helps you to put yourself in my position. Relatable characters. Now, the characters in your story might actually just be other learners or teachers, and you can help learners to identify with them by comparing them with somebody well known, like, my teacher at that time was like a cross between Miss Trunchbull and the Incredible Hulk. Creating an identifiable problem, like making characters familiar. You can make the problem seem familiar by making a comparison with something your learners will know. Specifics. Giving precise details can bring a story to life and prove authenticity. The power of 3. Now, when you want your audience to remember things, it can be easier in 3s, and even easier if there's some other kind of language hook, such as alliteration, between what those 3 things are that you want your learners to remember. Then there's the power of you. You can build a great deal of connection simply by replacing I with you. For example, I knew they were laughing at me could become, you can imagine how I felt when they were all laughing at me. The power of silence. Leaving a pause allows your audience to fill in a gap in their own minds. And I'm using the word audience, so you might have an audience if you're doing an assembly in your setting or a large group, but otherwise your audience is simply your class. Empathy. For a story to work effectively, the audience needs to feel, not simply follow the story as a logical process. So asking them how they'd feel in that situation or if that happened to them. Planting seeds. Before you give the solution or resolve the story, it can be a good way to get your audience to predict it, either by laying seeds earlier on or even by simply asking a what if question. Like, what if there was a way to guarantee I'd not make the same mistake again? And that's actually quite a nice way, a little hook of getting your learners to come up with answers for you. And you could just as easily use that in a maths lesson as you could in a a sort of more traditionally story formatted subject like history. For example, there's you can absolutely use stories in maths and science, logical, factual subjects as with anything else. You might it's another one like health and social care. There's tons of stories you could that easily come about through that, but just as well you can use storytelling techniques for more factual subjects. And then finally, empower the hero. So the struggle described in the story, it doesn't have to be solved by the person experiencing it. So if you were telling a personal story, the hero in any story is the person who saves the day. And giving that power to somebody other than yourself is a good way to appear relatable and humble. Or you can empower your audience to come up with the solution for the hero, whatever problem it is that they're facing. So let's have a think about what concepts within your subject area would benefit from a storytelling approach to help understanding. I'll leave that question with you. You can pause the recording and then come back to it once you've thought of some ideas. Obviously, we asked this in the live session, and so lots of ideas came through. And on this slide, we've got some of the responses from the live sessions that were written in the chat, and then I've just copied them onto this slide. No editing, just copying straight over. So some ideas were that bear in mind that a lot of the attendees were for teaching different topics, so some of them might actually be teaching childcare, etc. So using puppets for the early years or activity planning for children, using pictures through storytelling, and then other teachers using case studies in business. Some concepts that would can benefit that you wouldn't expect, like project manufacturing, engineering drawings, CAD. Somebody said about using history and maths, how was the measuring system created? And somebody else commented, oh yes, they do that. They explain about Pythagoras theorem. So bringing stories into maths. Somebody else saying, using storytelling to tell the story of the power and purpose of data. So it's you really can bring what could potentially be some dry topics. Not saying that data. I do quite enjoy a good bit of data. Some what could potentially be dry topics, bringing them to life through storytelling. So we've got some further reading on this subject on the slide. And if you would like the slides, you can request them. You can send an email. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you've got any further questions or if you would like these slides, then please contact us. The email address for my team is provider.development@ncfe.org.uk. Thank you.